For 20 years, 5 men held some of the highest security clearances in Britain and used every one of them to betray their country to Moscow. The Cambridge Five didn't break into British intelligence. They were welcomed, promoted, and protected by the very system they were destroying. How they fooled one of the most powerful intelligence services on Earth starts in the 1930s at one university with one Soviet recruiter. At Trinity College, Cambridge, in the early 1930s, the Great Depression and the rise of European fascism sparked a radical shift among Britain's young intellectual elite. In the wood-paneled rooms of historic colleges, students debated the collapse of capitalism and the promise of a socialist future. Secret discussion societies like the Cambridge Apostles and the open meetings of the Communist Party of Great Britain became breeding grounds for intense ideological conviction. Here, traditional loyalties of class and empire began to dissolve, replaced by a passionate devotion to the Soviet cause. Into this fertile ground stepped Arnold Deutsch, a brilliant Czech-born NK-5D operative working under the academic cover of a university researcher. Deutsch bypassed traditional mercenary agents. He focused strictly on idealistic youths driven by genuine anti-fascist belief, recognizing that their privileged backgrounds would eventually carry them into the heart of the British establishment. Through close friendship circles and shared student societies, Deutsch quietly assembled his network. He first recruited Harold Kim Philby, who then helped guide him toward Guy Burgess and Donald Maclean. Soon, Anthony Blunt and John Cairncross entered the same covert pipeline. Long before they held state secrets, these 5 young men, united by class privilege and radical zeal, were already bound to Moscow and to each other by a quiet pact of absolute betrayal. In the years following their recruitment, the British class system transformed these young radicals from potential suspects into untouchable insiders. Social background and elite connections acted as a passport, opening the most sensitive corridors of the British state without a second glance. Kim Philby entered the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, rising rapidly to run its anti-Soviet counterintelligence division. This role gave Moscow a direct view of Western plans to track down Soviet agents. Guy Burgess moved through the circles of journalism, the BBC, and the Foreign Office. His broad political reach allowed him to gather internal intelligence and diplomatic cables. Donald Maclean secured a diplomatic post in the Foreign Office, eventually heading the American department. This position put him near Anglo-American policy discussions and sensitive atomic energy negotiations. Anthony Blunt built an impeccable cover as an art historian, ultimately becoming the surveyor of the Queen's pictures. His royal proximity provided the perfect social shield to hide his covert loyalties. John Cairncross worked at Bletchley Park, decoding secret German communications. This gave him access to wartime signals intelligence, which he quickly passed to his Soviet handlers. Within these secure institutions, class privilege turned access into assumption, leaving the state's deepest secrets unprotected. The transition from access to active betrayal occurred in absolute silence, measured in microfilm and midnight meetings. From his post in the Foreign Office, Donald Maclean systematically copied high-level diplomatic cables and Allied nuclear policy documents, giving Moscow an exact blueprint of Western strategic thinking. At Bletchley Park, John Cairncross smuggled raw German ultra-decrypts out of his office, passing detailed orders of battle directly to his Soviet handler, codenamed Henry. In July 1943, this specific intelligence gave the Red Army precise, advance warning of German troop movements for Operation Citadel, directly shaping the Soviet defense and ultimate victory at the Battle of Kursk. While Maclean and Cairncross supplied raw intelligence, Kim Philby provided the ultimate shield. Operating from the very center of British counterintelligence, Philby monitored Western efforts to hunt Soviet spies, instantly alerting Moscow to any domestic threats and keeping his own network entirely invisible. Meanwhile, Anthony Blunt maintained a steady, multi-year transmission of political and military assessments gathered from his own wartime role inside MI5, ensuring the betrayal was not a series of isolated leaks, but a continuous, systemic flow of information. The mechanics of this massive intelligence pipeline relied on disciplined Soviet tradecraft. Sensitive documents were photographed, reduced to microfilm, and hidden in hollowed-out everyday objects. The spies left these packages in prearranged dead drops, such as a brick cavity beneath a public bench in Hyde Park, or passed them during brief, synchronized handoffs in Regent's Park. When physical contact was necessary, they used courier networks traveling through Europe or held fleeting anonymous meetings with handlers in bustling Paris cafes. Through these silent pipelines, thousands of pages of secret state files traveled from the desks of London straight to the Kremlin. MI5 files KV24723 and KV24727 documented Guy Burgess's escalating liabilities long before his escape. Reports detailed his habitual heavy drinking, unauthorized copying of secret telegrams, and a notorious incident where he dropped a file of classified Foreign Office documents on the pavement outside a pub. Yet, senior officials repeatedly dismissed these security risks. In a March 1951 internal memo, an MI5 officer noted that Burgess's social standing and establishment connections made full-scale dismissal difficult. Class-based deference substituted for rigorous vetting. A gentleman's loyalty was assumed unquestionable. This systemic denial ran so deep that even after Burgess and Maclean vanished, the establishment protected its own. In November 1955, Foreign Secretary Harold Macmillan publicly cleared Kim Philby in the House of Commons, declaring there was no evidence he had betrayed his country. A month later, Philby held a televised press conference, confidently asserting his innocence to reporters. By treating class as a shield, British intelligence ensured its own blindness, allowing the remaining traitors to survive in plain sight. On May 25, 1951, Donald Maclean and Guy Burgess suddenly vanished from England, boarding a ferry to France before slipping behind the Iron Curtain. Their flight triggered an immediate panic within MI5 and the Foreign Office. Investigators realized a mole inside the state had tipped them off to the impending interrogation of Maclean. Suspicion fell squarely on Kim Philby, who had been stationed in Washington as the chief British intelligence liaison. Recalled to London, Philby faced intense interrogation but maintained his innocence, protected by political allies who refused to believe one of their own was a traitor. For over a decade, Philby lived under a cloud of unresolved suspicion, eventually working as a journalist in Beirut. The end came in January 1963. MI6 officer Nicholas Elliott arrived in Lebanon with fresh, undeniable evidence of Philby's treason. Confronting his former friend in a secure flat, Elliott offered a stark ultimatum. Philby had to choose between suicide and prosecution. Philby signed a partial confession but refused to surrender. Weeks later, on a stormy night, he evaded British surveillance, boarded the Soviet freighter Dolmatovo, and escaped to Moscow. His defection confirmed the worst fears of Western intelligence. The longest-serving, most destructive spy ring in British history had finally collapsed, leaving the nation's intelligence credibility shattered. In April 1964, Anthony Blunt privately confessed to MI5. To secure his cooperation, officials granted him secret immunity, hiding his betrayal from the public for over a decade. When Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher exposed Blunt in November 1979, the revelation shattered public trust. Soon after, John Cairncross was identified as the fifth member of the ring. These exposures dismantled the institutional belief that social standing guaranteed loyalty. In response, Britain overhauled its security culture, enforcing rigorous background checks and strict compartmentalization. The vulnerability lay within a system that chose social deference over vigilant defense. Today, the scars of this betrayal still shape modern intelligence. The greatest threat is never the enemy we watch, but the insider we refuse to suspect. In a world of secrets, trust remains the ultimate vulnerability. Was the system truly purged? Share your thoughts below.